Christians and the others. I lack the time to say what I had planned to say, but I'll do what I can in the few minutes left. We have been exploring the relation between the sheep and the shepherd, but I mean specifically the sheep and their shepherd. Jesus says there is more than one shepherd. In the statement of the conference theme, I particularly appreciated the observation that some of us may still struggle to find our calling, even while clinging to the college's ideals. Some of us may feel that these ideals did not serve us in our life after the college. Consider this issue of a calling. What do we mean when we speak this way of a calling? Calling, biblically, is directly related to what we have been talking about. The shepherd, said Jesus, calls his own sheep by name. A calling, how we use it, how Jesus uses it here, is something that speaks to you specifically. People might say something that you connect with, but the metaphor of connecting is poorer than this one. Jesus' metaphor, being called by name, is completely clear. Someone who knows your name knows something that identifies you and is able to single you out from every other person and speak to you. What is the actual human life situation that is not shepherding that Jesus is talking about? The relation that is marked biblically by the word father is the relation of love. It is not human love. In relation to you, Jesus, God, neither is that kind of father who talks about himself, his knowledge, his reasons for doing things, the thing he knows to be good for you. God is the name of the Father who knows you, who created something exactly for you. He surpasses human fathers because he gives us something from his hand that we have already craved. This, I believe, is how he calls our name. You must understand, however, that I am talking about all people. When God says the human sheep of my pasture, who does he mean? The world is the pasture. All the people roam it, pursuing the good things that he made possible. All the people. We crave, long for something without complete knowledge of either what it is we want or where to find it. One of the things that I was always highly conscious of teaching in a college, a place for students who are usually just turning adults, is that these people I am working for are at that stage of life when this longing blooms. Even though I have memory trouble, I have no trouble remembering what it was like to be a human being entering the world on my own and what that perspective was like. The young person, young adult, whatever term you like, who is by definition no longer a managed person, but is out in the world, has, with all that I now know about life, I still believe this, a natural instinct for sheer glory. The shine is there on the world in full. I want to say the Shekinah is there on the world, in a manner of speaking. The Shekinah is the majestic manifestation of God which has descended to dwell among men. And so it cannot be that, can it? Since what I'm talking about is a thing that you can feel even if you don't believe in God. But maybe that is just what it is, only not identified. The world is enchanted with some kind of promise. The young person has a natural excitement that is correctly attuned to what is there. But the reality is that it is out there, and we're not in fact sure what it is. Something comes to us that is, for us, some kind of answer. It is a thing marked by goodness. This is something calling to us. If it is in the world and good, then it comes from God. And if you were a student of mine, then you were taught after St. Augustine that no one but God creates good. There are no evil goods. Evil is always neglect of some good that should not be neglected, because that neglect can hurt you and others. In the parable of the prodigal son, it is good that is calling the younger son. It is something that makes his life meaningful. And because of this, the father lets the son go, helps him to go. I'm not sure that Jesus ever says, "Obey me," which is what the paternalist father says, faced with a prodigal son. Jesus was a father in giving his children something both good for them and loved by them. But there are sheep that do not want it because they find nothing in it. That is the parable. In fact, the thing I have just called offered by Jesus is always offered by the Christian culture, which cannot find the son's wavelength and put on it what is intelligibly his so that he could receive it. The paternalistic culture is always offering a paternalistic good, meaningful to the father, but not, and especially in this age, to the children. And because this culture has been post-Christian for quite some time, it has been hard to find young people interested in Christian culture in the Western tradition. But God is within all the actual goods, the ones that call a person's name. We ought, in this phase of history, perhaps spend more time thinking about this. And here I want to ask you a question, the first of two, which I will close with, which is, who should they follow? Who should these other sheep follow? The ones that are not, according to Jesus, his sheep. But note, my question is, what would Jesus answer? This is a test, actually, the very thing we were looking at in the last part, knowing the voice. You know the voice if, where there are two possible answers, you know which one your leader would give. We hear the two answers. Which has his voice? Do we know his voice? Jesus talks about my sheep, implying that there are other sheep. Who would Jesus say the sheep that are not his sheep should follow? Jesus? The good offered by the Christian culture, telling them what is right, which they do not want, as in the parable? Or the good that they hear calling them? Because I've used the word should, you might feel heavily inclined to say they should follow him, because in your mind the use of the word should will appear to wipe away every trace of circumstance. Whenever the word should is used, the issue is what is best ultimately, regardless of the situation. But that is not true. Under these circumstances, what should be done is a perfectly meaningful question. And in these illustrations and parables, Jesus always provides a circumstance. The setting you are asked to think about is in the story. In Jesus' talk of sheep, there are different shepherds, different flocks. He is one shepherd, there are others. Same thing in the parable of the prodigal son. Two sons, two paths. The question is a question about today. What things have come to in our house, so to speak, at this moment? Question about this. Jesus gives us the answer of the father in the parable of the prodigal son. Who ought we to follow in that we are Christians? Our shepherd, whom we know. Who ought the other sheep follow? The ones who are not, according to Jesus, his sheep? They should follow their shepherd. The voice that has led those sheep to what is good in their experience. This is the nature of life. The world is the garden of love. That is the way God made it. In my hunger, I fell upon those lovely things that you have made. This is the way things are, and we can be sure that God does not intend things to go on as they are, with other sheep going off to a troubled fate. But our insistence that these other people are on the wrong path because they are not on our path, that these other people ought to follow Jesus now, whether it means anything to them or not. They ought to listen to us. We are the ones who know what's good for them. This is at odds with his voice. He never calls us to lead the other sheep. It is not in his teachings. In the others, there are no people for us to lead. We are not the leaders of the world. God is in charge of his world. He has not called us to manage the other sheep. He wants us to manage our own lives by learning his voice. That voice said, follow. Christians have had a wish to lead others, said Blake, when they should be led. My closing question: what does the world need? If the world doesn't listen to us, then we say in a panicked voice, but the world needs the Father, its master. We look at the world and have the idea that God is not directing the people he created except for us. But has the Father abandoned his children? Are we their Savior? Who are the children of God? The evangelist John writes, "It is evident who are the children of God and who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother." The children of God are indeed the twice born, those born again of God. No one born of God makes a practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him. He cannot keep on sinning because he has been born of God. To be a child of God is a right. It is something you might become. To all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. The Apostle Paul writes to the church at Rome, "The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him." Not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel. This means that it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of God, but the children of the promise. All of this is very clear, but it can hide the fact that this status is offered to all. The New Testament uses the children of God to signify a father-child relationship in which the children inherit an everlasting life that belongs only to the Father, a life beyond this life that they are reborn into. The children of the flesh reject this inheritance and do not recognize God as their Father. But as Jesus' parable of the prodigal son shows, the offer is given to all God's children, even those who reject. The younger son repudiated his father, but remained his father's child all the time he was off in the far country, ruining his life. He did come back to become part of the family again, to become, Jesus tells us, a child of God in that specific sense, a child who will receive all that God wants to bestow on him. But he was always a child of God in the deeper and unalterable sense that we see in the parable. He was created by the Father and loved by the Father, and we see this sense of the concept, children of God, in the New Testament too. God is Father of all, Father of every person created. When John writes, "See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God," we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. He is writing about an inheritance, a gift that is offered to all by God, who sees all people as his children, even while they're rejected. Yet it is only those who receive the gift who will have this thing that will be. And in Jesus' parable, quite strangely, it is only the other son, the rejecter, who finds his way into the feast. Only the son who cares about what is calling him, what is speaking to him, calling his name, who speaks like Blake, "And thus I turn my face to where my whole soul seeks." William Blake wrote this about who? About every human being? In our presumption that the others are lost because they are not living like us, we are not really getting the whole picture Jesus has given us. It is not as simple as that. Paternal responsibility for those whom God places in our care is inescapable. But he hasn't placed the world in our care. The world is in his hands. But even over those whom God has put in your care, all interaction between older and younger needs constant transformation into following, constant testing. Close then, finally. The alternatives that I have described are a conception of education that embraces paternalism and authority as the great rescue of sheep without a shepherd, the lost flock, versus another conception that sees paternalism and authority as just two more modes of goodness. They're both good, that man can and will subvert and commandeer to serve his own self, unless he repudiates leading as much as possible by turning everything possible into following. In the parable of the prodigal son, the father, you could say, exercises his authority by not leading, rather by letting the son go after his own heart. So the subject of my lecture in the end has been on being led out in the post-Christian age from a trap of history, led away from a temptation. We are being called to hear the voice, that is, called to stop listening to the voice of the world that sees paternalism as all positive, a divine duty we were assigned in the scriptures, which called us holy. And hear another voice that tells us that the dream of Christian civilization is just one more manifestation of our soul trouble, man slipping away from God, setting his mind on the things of man, us putting ourselves at the center, not reducing ourselves to our own humble business. The dream that rules is Christ. Christians are showing the way simply in being Christians, only if Christian here means one thing, a follower of Christ and not a leader at all, a person whose attention is fixed on the character of the leader. If we have not got this message, then we need the education that teaches the voice of God, the whole voice. Thank you for your patience.